Chapter 4, Part 2. So we just looked at formal analysis. We're into content analysis. What does it contain? What is the content? So a content is an artwork's theme or message, and it's conveyed through its subject matter, symbolic references, and iconic references. Okay, so the subject matter, pretty obviously, are people at a diner. Okay, but when we get into what more of the meaning of the painting is, um, through a few different viewpoints, a few different methods, then we get a little bit more deeply into the meaning. So the content is conveyed through iconography or symbolic references, and then written materials and cultural background. In this particular piece, it's going to be mostly the written material, but in the iconography, there's not really iconography in this piece. We'll talk about that in a minute. But remember, though, dark color conveys a mood, emptiness, the sporadic figures in here. This guy's not interacting with that couple. That guy's barely talking to our guy behind the counter serving the coffee, the guy working in the diner. And it's kind of a bleak scene, so we kind of know that some of the meaning or the intent is loneliness just by looking at the emptiness here. And people that are out late at night, the stores are closed, there's no lights on anywhere else but in this diner. Subject matter is the substance of a work of art. All works have a subject matter, even if they're abstract or non-objective. Now remember, non-objective is things like just a bunch of stripes or a bunch of lines or a circle. This work that we're looking at, it's a little tricky to tell if it's abstract or non-objective. Our book is telling us that this is an abstract piece. It's almost the point of non-objective, but it's giving us this cycles is the name of this piece, setting cycles, and it's got kind of a moon shaped sphere here with sort of pock marks, so it kind of has this look of the moon. Could be the sun as well. And then we've got these layers of paper and materials, and that's giving us a sense of time passing. So we know from the title a little bit that this might have a meaning in terms of time elapsing, because it's setting, cycles that are setting, right? Okay, so it's got a bunch of interesting materials, by the way. So it also is talking about the organization of the materials: smooth versus rough, organic versus mechanical, circular versus rectangular, colorful versus neutral, empty versus dense. So it's giving us a lot of open areas, if that makes sense, and then some tighter, denser areas. And then organic would be some of these flowing edges and so on. And then there's actually like a rectangle here within that flowing edge. Circular versus rectangular is another one. Colorful, look at all this bright, saturated. Or we also call these high density colors versus these lower density colors of beige and brown, and those are also called neutrals, okay? Empty versus dense. All right, so our subtext in this particular piece would be loneliness, and it asks you what this is saying. It's in the book, but I'm going to help you out here. It would be loneliness, and we know that for two reasons, right? One, all this darkness late at night, no crowds and people interacting. Those are the two things. Sorry, I should have separated that out better. So the dark colors are one, and the other one is the sparsity of human interaction. There's a little bit of interaction going on here, but a lot of times with Hopper's pieces, there's just one figure looking out a window. There's just a lot more isolation than this, and you might know that because you've looked at other Hopper paintings, but there's generally one figure. But in this case, there's only one figure interacting with another. He's sort of interacting with this woman. We don't really know. They could have known each other and come in together, but we don't really have that information. Part of the other subtext in this painting is that we're looking in here at them, and there's no doorway out. Normally a diner has a doorway right here on the corner, and for some reason this isn't showing that to us. Well, that reason is because we're meant to feel that tense, claustrophobic feeling of being trapped in that space. And they are a little bit trapped in there because there's no one else out there. And once they leave, they've left the safety of this particular diner, right? And I think we all kind of know that when we've been out late or been off somewhere we don't know very well and everything else is closed and we're in this safe environment, and then the minute we go out we feel very uncomfortable because we have to walk a distance on our own or get to our car, what have you. So that was part of the subtext. The other part of it is that World War II, and this is in the US, right? World War II, we've just entered it in 1942. We entered it, in December of 1941, end of the year. But in 42, he's got this sense of impending doom. We don't know what's going to happen. And at this particular time in 1942, it was not looking likely that the Allied forces, meaning the US and Britain, France, and so on, were going to win this war. There were a lot of doubts, that whether or not Hitler was going to succeed, a lot of doubts that we would be able to prevail. So there was a lot of stress and a lot of darkness and doubt. Okay, iconography. So the iconography in this piece, again, this is not a Christian piece. There's no Christianity in these Buddhist areas. There are other religions, but probably not until the late 19th century, early 20th century, did any kind of Christian thought come into these areas. So remember that. Iconography is something that works for Christianity, it works for Buddhism, it works for Hinduism, it works for a lot of things. The Greek and Roman empires, and Egypt is one of our biggest ones, but mostly I would say Christianity and ancient Egypt are what we're going to look at the most in terms of iconography. And it's a system of symbols that refer to complex ideas. Now, symbols, we don't show the image in here, but there is a image of symbols in your book, and those have to do with things like, a telephone, so you know where to use the telephone, and so on. But those aren't things that you necessarily naturally know what they mean. You have to be taught. Now, in this case, this is Yama, the Indian god of death, and he is fighting against lust, and he's stepping on this creature here and crushing him. But this is a symbol of lust and other sort of human frailties. Okay, so a lot of times students will say this fire here is hell. There isn't hell in Buddhism. Okay, these guys sitting on clouds, and they're also kind of further down a little bit around off to the sides. These are bodhisattvas. Okay, they're not angels. They're similar, but they're not the same thing. And there's other mini yamas as well. Okay, so there's different icons here. There's skulls. There's fire, as we said. There's this thunderbolt that he's holding in his hand. Kind of hard to see there, but there's a lot of different iconography in Buddhism. Very different than it would be in Christianity, but there are some similarities. So, like, you see how there's a halo here? That is similar to Christianity. The halo is something that repeats in other cultures. So, he's wearing a leopard skin, headdress of human skulls, thunderbolt, chopper, and skull, and he's standing on black lotus petals in a sea of blood. So, here's our sea of blood here, lotus petals here. So our visual metaphor is image or element that is descriptive of something else. So it's something like fire could be lust. It could be a lot of other things. The sea of blood, you know, he is the god of death. So a symbol is an image or element that stands or represents for some other entity or concept, and symbols are culturally determined and must be taught. Okay, oh, we did show it. Okay, great. Symbols, these are understood by large numbers of people. Now, these were designed by a graphic design company, okay, in the 70s, 1970s. That's why they have this look, really. It's interesting if you think about it. But, like, for instance, this dollar sign, most people know that that refers to money, but dollars only exist in the US, Australia, and a handful of other places, right? In Mexico, we have the peso. In England, we have, right now, we have the euro, which is, this predates the euro, but this is the pound, the franc, and that's the yen, which is Japanese. But right here, the predominant symbol is the dollar, and then they kind of added those for more international reference. We know that this looks like a bus. Buses tend to look pretty much the same all over the world. Cars kind of look like this, but they looked more like that in the 70s. Luggage mostly looks like this, but usually it's wheeled nowadays. But like, where is my luggage? Question mark luggage. Where is it? Parking, that's a big P. So we've come to know what these mean over time, and we have used these internationally. So this was decided by a U.S. company, actually, who designed this, but then it was decided to put these in every airport in the world, and therefore you would kind of have some idea of what to do and where to go. So you were going to walk over to the right, and you'll find parking and the buses, and you're going to walk straight, or right here underneath this sign is where you're going to find taxis, and you're going to find lost luggage, and you're going to get some money changed, right? So that's important, okay? Iconography can also be embedded in architecture. So let me back up for a second. So these are symbols that can be considered iconography, and we went back, we have iconography here as well. All right, so in this piece, remember we talked about it being Greek and Roman architecture. This is connecting the U.S. government to the ideas of democracy and power. Greece would be the democracy, and that predates the Roman Empire. Roman Empire was vast. It was the biggest empire in the world for almost 2,000 years, about 1,400 years into the British Empire. And the Ottoman Empire was quite large too, but the Roman Empire was enormous in the year 0 to about, I think, year 400, something like that. So for quite a long time, the Roman Empire in the Western Europe and a little bit into the East was huge. It was a big deal, very powerful. And Greece was much more known. Greeks did not colonize other places so much. They didn't expand their power, but they were very focused on democracy and culture and refinement of architecture and music and theater and all of the arts. And that's the foundation of who we are today. So it's connecting the U.S. government to those ideals of Greece.